All right, so we're diving into the Scarlet Letter this time. You sent over some excerpts, which I gotta say is perfect.
It lets us really get to the core of the story and its significance
Yeah.
without, getting bogged down in some of the denser parts.
Exactly. It's like we can jump right into the good stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
So, okay, picture this. It's a summer morning. We're in 17th century Boston.
Okay, I can picture it.
Almost 200 years ago to the day, actually. And there's this crowd gathering, right? You can feel the anticipation in the air, but here's the thing.
Okay.
This isn't your typical, festive gathering. This is Puritan Boston.
Right.
And they're about to make an example of someone.
And the way Hawthorne describes it, he doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of that anticipation.
Oh, absolutely not.
There's this sense of almost morbid curiosity in the air, along with the sort of excitement of witnessing a public spectacle.
Totally. It's like, something big is about to go down, but there's this underlying current of, I don't know, maybe even a little bit of fear.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a society where sin and punishment are taken very, very seriously.
For sure. So everyone's wondering, who is this person? What have they done?
And that's when we first meet Hester Prynne.
Right, center stage.
She comes out of the prison, and you immediately notice her beauty.
Yeah.
Even in this moment of public shame, she's striking.
Hawthorne's descriptions of her are so vivid.
Yeah, and you can't miss the Scarlet Letter A on her dress.
That Scarlet Letter. He spends so much time describing it, every little detail of the embroidery.
It's almost like she's reclaiming some part of herself through that act of sewing,
Right. It's like, yeah, you're trying to brand me, but I'm going to make this my own.
Exactly. It becomes a symbol of her resilience, her defiance even, in the face of this incredibly rigid and judgmental society.
And of course, we can't forget the baby in her arms.
Right. This tiny little
This
bit.
innocent child who's immediately caught up in the middle of it all. And it makes you think, what's her story going to be?
Exactly. And that's where Arthur Dimmesdale comes in.
Oh, Dimmesdale. Okay, so we know he's important, but at this point in the story, it's like he's this shadowy figure lurking in the background.
We know his secret, but the crowd doesn't.
It's like a ticking time bomb.
Right. And you can already feel the tension building.
Because we know that Dimmesdale, this young and charismatic minister, is connected to Hester in a way that could completely shatter their community.
He represents the moral authority of the very society that's condemning Hester.
Exactly. It's like Hawthorne is setting up this incredible clash between outward appearances and hidden truths.
And the way he does it is just, it's masterful.
It's so good. He's not just giving us a straightforward story about sin and punishment.
No, not at all. He's forcing us to confront the hypocrisy.
And the secrets. And the way power dynamics play out in a society that claims to be all about piety and righteousness.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful ways he does this is through his use of symbolism. I mean, take the Scarlet Letter itself, for instance.
Right. It's not just a physical mark of shame.
It takes on all these different layers of meaning throughout the story.
Right. It's like it represents her sin, obviously, but also her strength, her identity.
And the fact that she's the one who made it, that she embroidered it so beautifully.
That's so important.
It speaks volumes about her character and how she chooses to navigate this incredibly difficult situation.
And it makes me think about that excerpt you sent where Hester reflects on the natural world as her only source of solace.
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorite passages, when she talks about how the natural world doesn't judge her the way her community does.
It's like she finds this freedom in nature that's completely denied to her in society.
Yes, and he describes it so beautifully, too, like when he writes, what was that line? Something about,
Oh, I think I have it here. Hold on. Okay, here it is. The chain that bound her here was of iron links and galling to her inmost soul, but could never be broken.
Yes, that's the one. It's like she's physically and emotionally imprisoned by the judgment of her community.
Exactly.
But there's something about nature that offers her a different kind of connection.
A connection that's more authentic, more forgiving.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of judgment, Hawthorne doesn't let those Puritan leaders off the hook either. I'm thinking of that part where he describes their clothing, all the extravagant details.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It's like, even as they're condemning Hester for her supposed sinfulness, they're indulging in their own forms of excess.
It's such a blatant double standard.
Total hypocrisy, right? And Hawthorne calls them out on it. Let me see if I can find that passage. Here it is. Deep ruffs, painfully wrought bands, and gorgeously embroidered gloves were all deemed necessary to the official state of men assuming the reins of power, and were readily allowed to individuals dignified by rank or wealth, even while sumptuary laws forbade these and similar extravagances to the plebeian order.
Boom. There it is. He's not subtle about it, is he?
Nope. He wants us to see the hypocrisy at the heart of the society.
It's like he's saying, don't be fooled by their outward piety. Look closer. There's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface.
Exactly. And that's what makes the Scarlet Letter so much more than just a historical novel. It's about human nature. It's about the things we try to hide and the consequences of those secrets.
It's timeless.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, it's really through Hester's story that we see those universal themes of guilt and sin and redemption, come to life.
Totally.
Like, we see her struggling with what society thinks of her, but at the same time, she's so strong.
It's like they try to use that Scarlet Letter to crush her, but she actually uses it
to become even stronger.
Yeah, exactly. Like it backfires on them. She doesn't let it define her.
It's really interesting how Hawthorne uses the natural world to, mirror what's going on inside Hester. You remember that part where she and Dimmesdale meet in the forest?
Oh my gosh, that scene is intense.
So good, right?
The way he describes the setting, all those trees and shadows, it's like the forest itself is a reflection of their secret.
Exactly. It's like this hidden space where they can actually be honest with each other, away from all the judgment and the rules of their society.
And Hawthorne actually describes it so beautifully. He talks about the bewilderment of tree trunks and underbrush, and here and there a huge rock covered over with gray lichens.
It's like the forest is a character in itself. But even there, they can't completely escape. Their actions have consequences.
Right. And then there's Pearl.
Ah, Pearl. She's such a fascinating character.
I mean, talk about a force of nature. She's like living proof of their sin, but also there's something so innocent and pure about her at the same time.
And kind of wild, untamed.
Totally. Do you remember that part where Chillingworth, questions her very existence? He's like, what in heaven's name is she? Is the imp altogether evil? Hath she affections? Hath she any discoverable principle of being?
Oh, yeah. Chillingworth is so creepy in general, but that part always gives me chills.
He's just so obsessed with revenge at that point. He's lost all sense of, human decency.
Exactly. And, it's interesting because in a way, Pearl becomes this kind of mirror, reflecting back all the hidden truths of the other characters.
Oh, I like that. She's like this innocent presence who can see through all their facades.
Exactly.
And she pays the price for their sin, too. The way she's ostracized and treated differently by the community just because of who her parents are.
It's heartbreaking. But it also really highlights the hypocrisy of the whole Puritan society, right?
Right.
They're so quick to judge, but they don't see the ways they're contributing to the problem.
It's like they create the conditions for these sins to happen, and then they punish people for it.
Exactly. And, for all their talk about piety and morality, they're pretty blind to the real suffering they cause.
And then there's that incredible scene with Dimmesdale's sermon on Election Day. Oh my God, the tension is unreal.
Like the whole story has been building to that moment,
Totally. And poor Hester, standing there in the crowd, knowing his secret, and feeling all those eyes on her.
Knowing that every word he's saying is filled with his own guilt and torment.
Hawthorne describes his voice as trembling with awe. And you can practically hear the anguish in every sentence. It's like he's speaking directly to Hester, even as he's addressing the whole town.
And when he finally reveals the mark on his chest.
Oh my God, chills.
Right. Talk about a powerful moment. It's like he's finally taking ownership of his actions.
It's tragic, though, because he finds peace, but at the cost of his own life.
And Hester is left to pick up the pieces, to try to build a life for herself and Pearl in a society that still judges them both so harshly.
But she doesn't give up, does she?
No. She's incredibly resilient.
She could have easily run away, but she chooses to stay, to make a life for herself right there in Boston where everyone knows her story.
And she keeps wearing the Scarlet Letter. But now, it means something different, right? It's not a symbol of shame anymore. It's a symbol of her strength.
And her compassion. I mean, she ends up helping other people who are struggling, who've been cast out by society.
Right. Like she's taking that experience and using it to empower herself and help others.
It's a powerful message about taking ownership of your story, no matter how difficult it might be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, what about Pearl? Do you think she ever finds peace?
That's a tough one. Hawthorne kind of leaves her fate open-ended, right?
Yeah, we know she inherits money and leaves Boston.
But we don't really know what becomes of her.
It's like he's acknowledging that the past can cast a long shadow.
For sure. But maybe in a way, that uncertainty is also a form of freedom for Pearl. Like, she has the chance to create her own story on her own terms.
To define herself rather than letting others define her.
Exactly. Oh, and speaking of stories, we need to talk about the whole document aspect of this book. You know, the framing device that Hawthorne uses.
Oh, right, the whole old surveyor's manuscript thing. That's easy to forget about when you get caught up in the story itself.
It's like we're reading this story about Hester, but then there's this whole other layer of like, wait a minute, who found this story in the first place? And how much of it is actually true?
Right. It makes you wonder how much of what we believe about history is really just like someone else's interpretation.
And how those interpretations get passed on and become like the accepted narrative.
Exactly. Like, whose voices are we hearing and whose stories are getting left out?
It's kind of like Hawthorne is prompting us to think critically, even about the stories we think we know. But, okay, so after all that, where do you think Hawthorne lands with this whole thing? Is the Scarlet Letter ultimately a hopeful story or a depressing one?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I kind of think it's both, you know?
Yeah, there are definitely some dark moments.
Like, the whole thing is about sin and guilt and the weight of societal judgment. So yeah, it can be pretty heavy. But at the same time, I don't know, there's also this incredible sense of resilience in these characters.
Especially Hester. Like, she goes through so much, but she never completely breaks.
Right. She finds a way to make her own meaning, even when it feels like the world is determined to define her by her past.
I love that. Like, she could have easily just disappeared, you know? But she chooses to stay and confront her past head on.
And in doing so, she kind of flips the script on everyone. The Scarlet Letter becomes her own symbol, not just something they're using to punish her.
Yeah, it's almost like she reclaims that power for herself.
Exactly. And that's what makes it hopeful for me, that even in the face of, like, overwhelming adversity, we can still find ways to write our own stories.
To choose how we want to be defined.
Exactly. Oh, and you know what we haven't talked about much? The natural world. I mean, it's not just a backdrop in this book, right? It's like this whole other character.
Totally. It's always there, reflecting what's going on with the characters, you know, like their emotions, their secrets.
Yeah, it's this powerful force that's both beautiful and kind of scary at the same time.
Like when Hester says to Dimmesdale, hold on, I wrote this one down. Okay, here it is. Then there is the broad pathway of the sea. It brought thee hither. If thou so choose, it will bear thee back again.
Oh, yeah. The sea is like this symbol of escape, of possibility. Like there's a whole world out there beyond their little Puritan town.
But they don't take it, do they?
Nope, they stay. Which I guess you could see as either like tragic or really brave.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes confronting our past, even the painful parts, is what allows us to move forward.
Right, to grow and maybe even find some kind of redemption.
Deep stuff. So, listeners, as you dive deeper into the Scarlet Letter, here's something to think about. What do you think true freedom looks like for Hester? Is it in her defiance of society's rules? Or is it in her eventual acceptance of her past?
And how does the natural world, Rena, with all its beauty and power, shape those choices?
Those are some big questions to ponder. But hey, that's what these deep dives are all about, right?
Exactly. Getting those brain juices flowing.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you back here soon for another deep dive. At the end of this podcast, please share your thoughts on the book, and if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.